Now for the latest analysis on our top stories, let's get right to our brain trust. Rachel Smolken, deputy managing editor at Politico. Boris Epstein is a contributor at the Daily Caller. And Christine Niedermeier, author of Straight Scoop Politics, the blog. Thank you all for being here today.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
All right, so Rachel, I want to start with you. U.S. interests abroad are facing this sweeping terror threat. Meanwhile, the president is golfing and celebrating his birthday, which he's entitled to do, and Congress is on vacation for 5 weeks, which of course is scheduled. But do the optics of this look bad while all of this security assessment is taking place globally?
Congress is scheduled to take a break, of course, so I don't think it looks bad that they left town for that reason. For all the other reasons, though, the optics aren't so good. Cranky Congress heads home but doesn't have a lot to show for it. Tensions running high, but the appropriations process is a mess. They didn't get the Farm Bill done. Immigration is stuck. So for all those reasons, the optics are not so good.
And Boris, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham told CNN that he does believe the administration is handling this threat appropriately, but he also took the opportunity to warn what could happen if some of the surveillance programs we've been discussing are curtailed. So let's take a quick listen to what he had to say.
To the members of the Congress who want to reform the NSA program, great. But if you want to gut it, you make us much less safe, and you're putting our nation at risk. We need to have policies in place that can deal with the threats that exist, and they are real and they are growing.
Is it too early to be politicizing this, or is this exactly the right time to say, hey, this is what these programs are for?
It's the right time to do so. I mean, the issue's been out there for a long time now. There's no question that the programs are in place and have been in place for a while throughout our nation's history. Intelligence has been around a long time. This shouldn't be news. The leaks are awful for our country, but the leaks should not force our country to stop some of the programs that keep us safe. As we see now, we are under constant threat, and even worse threat these days. So for us to say, well, because this one rogue idiot, frankly, in Snowden is going to go and release this information, we should not push back by, stopping some of the programs that keep us safe. We should do the opposite. So Senator Graham is right on point there.
And Christine, we've been hearing for the last 10 years how weakened al-Qaeda has become through our efforts against them. But then when you have something like this happening, does this cause the public to question how true that is, or if in fact they are stronger than we've been led to believe?
Well, I think after we saw the experience in Benghazi, I think the president wants to make sure that he takes every step possible to anticipate a potential attack. And I think it's important to note that several other countries have done the same, so it's not just the United States. And al-Qaeda will still be a strong force up there around the country and around the world, and we can't just afford to step back. I might say, though, a couple of things. Snowden, most recent polls show that Snowden is seen as a whistleblower, not a traitor. And number two, even though most polls also show that the American public supports and at least doesn't oppose tremendously the NSA program to track our emails and track our phone calls, they want to make sure it has a legitimate connection with security. And the concern I would have also as a lawyer is, the government collects information all the time, but the courts are there to determine whether that information can be acted upon and invaded in a sense. And here we have all this information that's just going to be sitting there in Washington, tempting people who may want to invade it and look at the security information, this private information that doesn't really have a legitimate public security interest.
But I think, the facts have shown that courts have opined. There are courts in place that follow the process on these surveillance programs. They've opined on it and allowed it to go forward. Now, as far as what the polls show, in my opinion, we should not govern our nation's security based on what polls think about one person in Snowden. We should govern based on what's best for the security of this country, and right now it's for those surveillance programs to continue.
Well, let me just say, it's just a question of whether it's overkill. I think again, there's a legitimate interest to securing information, to obtaining information. The question that Snowden has raised is this too broad? And that's a question that we need to address.
Let's turn now to domestic politics from this global terror threat. Rachel, just before Congress adjourned, the House voted for the 40th time to repeal Obamacare. MSNBC.com has an interesting article called 40 Things the House Could Have Done While It Was Busy Repealing Obamacare. It lists a number of other legislative issues that they could have tackled. Why do they keep spending so much time on this to the exclusion of other important legitimate legislative issues?
This is pure red meat for the base, this issue of Obamacare. They're going to keep trying again and again, so don't expect this to go away in the fall, no matter how much of an uphill climb it is. In fact, some Republicans, such as Ted Cruz, want to defund the government over Obamacare, so they're going to push hard on that issue. A lot of divisions in the Republican Party right now over how to handle Obamacare. Do you make your stand and try to stop government funding, or do you allow that to go through on the theory that could be very bad optics for the Republican Party and keep pushing in other ways?
But so far it's been symbolic. It hasn't had any real effect. So is there a point of diminishing returns where the public says enough, get back to work on stuff that really will make a difference in people's lives?
You know, Mara,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
That's absolutely a risk. I think that's one that the Republican Party is going to have to game out. There's a lot of, again, appeal to the base on this issue, but you run the risk of really turning off all the other voters. And Obamacare, it looks like it's here to stay. The Supreme Court has upheld it. It is the law of the land. We are waiting for sign-up to begin October 1st. So it's an uphill climb, and one that could easily be seen as more of a political issue while the business of the country remains unfinished.
And Christine, you wanted to weigh in on that?
I was just going to say this is just another example of semantics. A lot of what's going on in Washington is semantics, and not a lot is getting done. There's an old saying when I used to work on the Hill years ago that Washington, D.C. is 67 square miles surrounded by reality. And so I, for one, think it's good that members of the Senate and the House are going back home, because I think they need to hear from their constituents that whether it's immigration or the federal budget or spending controls or all the plethora of issues, they aren't getting the job done.
Well, Boris, these are your people. Right. You're a conservative.
As a Republican here, let's not forget that the reason the House representatives are majority Republican is because the majority of people elected the House to be that way. So these folks are representing their constituents as we speak, and that's why they keep having these votes. Are they productive? I'll be open and say they're not. It'd be much more productive to work with Democrats on the other side, because Democrats realize that Obamacare, as planned, is not going to work. That's why part of it was already pushed back. So as Republicans, what we need to do is say, okay, here's our top 5 issues. Should Obamacare be one of those? Absolutely, because that's what the constituents care about. But also immigration, the debt ceiling, and frankly, getting this economy out of a rut. We're still at tiny GDP growth. We need to concentrate on that.
But don't you think that then it runs the risk of creating the perception that it's a party of no, that it's a party of obstructionism as opposed to putting forth the things that they value? They're spending a lot of real legislative time opposing the things that they disagree with, but that have been implemented into law.
Well, they are implemented into law, but parts of them have already been pushed back. So I think that what the Republicans should be doing isn't necessarily focusing on just opposing Obama's issues. They need to be focusing on fixing certain mistakes on Obamacare that Democrats agree exist.
All right, we could talk about this for a while. We're out of time right now, but we will have all 3 of you back. Our brain trust will be back later in the show. Rachel Smolken, Boris Epstein, and Christine Niedermeier, thank you much for your time, and we'll see you again a little later.
Sure. Thank you.